A world until now unimaginable. Imagine this, mid-16th century, a world without airplanes, without telegraphs, without radios. A lonely sentry in gleaming metal and woven cloth stands at his post, gazing at a palace gate in Manila. The sun's last rays burn orange across the cobblestones. A breeze carries the smell of the sea. In a brief, humdrum moment, a blink, everything changes. He opens his eyes, one foot in one world, and the next, somewhere impossibly far. Air that feels different, sounds that feel unfamiliar, architecture he's never seen, and above him, vast blue sky. Not Manila's, but a sky that belongs to another hemisphere entirely. This is the story of Gil Pérez, the Spanish soldier who allegedly teleported from the Philippine archipelago to the heart of New Spain, Mexico City, in the year 1593. Part 1. The Empire at its height. To understand this tale, we must first grasp the world in which it unfolds. In 1593, the Spanish Empire reigned across continents. From the sun-baked plazas of Madrid to the balmy tropics of Manila and the vibrant markets of Mexico City, Spanish power stretched across oceans and cultures. It was an age of exploration, conquest, and deep belief in God, in kings, and in the extraordinary mysteries of life. Messages across oceans were carried by creaking galleons that took months to cross the Pacific. And so, on October 24, 1593, a young soldier, various accounts name him Gil Pérez, was on guard duty. He was stationed outside the Palacio del Gobernador in Manila, the seat of authority for the Spanish colony in the Philippines. His mission was simple yet vital: to stand watch. The night before, the colony had been rocked by sudden violence. The governor, Gómez Pérez das Mariñas, had been ambushed and killed by Chinese insurgents during a maritime expedition. The guards were on edge, awaiting word of a new governor. It was a world where danger lurked just beyond the city walls, where the seas were both lifeblood and peril, and where time itself seemed to tick unpredictably. Part 2. There and Not There. A blink that changed everything. The hours stretched into a hot, weary morning. Gil grew tired, his eyes heavy, his muscles aching, and just for a moment he leaned back against the stone wall, closed his eyes, and rested. Then, nothing. Or so he thought. When he opened his eyes, everything he knew was gone. His breath caught, his heart thudded. The world around him was different, unmistakably different. No longer was he at Manila's palace. Instead, he found himself in the Plaza Mayor, now called El Zócalo, in Mexico City, the bustling epicenter of the Spanish colonial capital in New Spain, nearly 9,000 nautical miles west across the vast Pacific Ocean. Sunlight here felt the same, but the air was strange. Voices sounded familiar yet unfamiliar, Spanish but with accents and rhythms Gil had never heard. And the buildings, how could he describe them? They were both foreign and vaguely reminiscent of home. Disoriented, he stood there, uniform still pristine, weapon by his side, mind spinning. Then a guard approached. Part 3. Stranger in a Strange Land. The first few moments were confusion. Locals approached him, puzzled by his attire. A Spanish soldier was nothing out of the ordinary in Mexico City, but this uniform was different.
It was unmistakably the garb of a guard from Manila. Someone asked where he came from. Gil answered, "Manila." He explained in his own words that he had been on duty just moments before, and now, inexplicably, he was here. But there was a problem. In Mexico, news traveled slowly. The assassination of Governor Dasmariñas was unknown there, because the ship carrying that information hadn't arrived yet. So when Gil mentioned it matter-of-factly, the local authorities were baffled. Instead of believing him, they labeled him a deserter, possibly a madman, perhaps even in league with the devil. Accusations like these were not taken lightly in an age when religion and political order were tightly interwoven. He was arrested.
Part 4. Imprisoned, disbelieved, and yet unseen truths. The authorities in Mexico City detained Gil Pérez for months. They interrogated him, seeking inconsistencies. They asked for letters, documents, anything. But Gil steadfastly repeated the same account. He had been guarding the palace in Manila. He had closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was here. According to some retellings, his statement included something eerie, that his journey had taken less time than it takes a cock to crow, a phrase that underscored the impossibility of what he claimed. Without evidence, without witnesses, without documents, he was trapped in a brutal legal reality. It was the Spanish Inquisition that took over his case, seeing in Gil's story not only absurdity, but potential heresy. The Church did not take kindly to claims beyond earthly explanation. Teleportation, in particular, was deeply alien to the theology of the time. What had happened to Gil Pérez? Was this a cruel fabrication? A bizarre hallucination? A psychological break? Or was the story more than merely strange? Part 5. The arrival of the galleon and the arrival of truth. Then, months later, a ship arrived. She came from Manila, heavily laden with goods, news, and sailors who had made the long Pacific crossing. Among the crew and passengers were men who had known Gil in the Philippines, men who could confirm his identity and the truth of the governor's assassination. One of these men stepped forward. He told the authorities that yes, he had seen Gil in Manila just before Gil's sudden disappearance. That was verification enough. In an instant, everything changed. The prisoner was no longer a lunatic or devil's servant. He was a man whose knowledge had been vindicated by events. The authorities had no choice but to release him. Gil Pérez was sent back to Manila on the next available vessel. His extraordinary story went with him.
Part 6. Fact, Fiction, and the Fog Between. Yet here the mystery deepens, because no contemporary account from 1593 explicitly names Gil Pérez. The earliest known source naming him appears more than a century later in the work of Mexican folklorist Luis González Obregón, and then popularized by American folklorist Thomas Alibon Janvier in 1908 as the legend of the living specter. Even earlier, an account from 1698 by Fray Gaspar de San Agustín in his chronicle of the Spanish conquest of the Philippines relates a similar event but does not name the soldier, describing only that a guard disappeared and later reappeared far away. That account ascribed the incident to witchcraft, a word with different connotations in the 17th century than today. Scholars debate fiercely whether the story is a folk legend born of centuries of oral tradition, a myth built to explain the rapid spread of news across oceans, an allegorical tale illustrating the limits of human understanding, or a kernel of truth that has been transformed by time and retelling? Some point to Antonio de Morga, a colonial official and chronicler who noted in 1609 that news of Governor das Mariñas's death had reached Mexico unusually quickly, faster than expected, though he made no mention of teleportation. Historians also note that long sea voyages, even at their fastest, took months, so any instantaneous travel defies known historical timelines. The absence of contemporary documentation naming Gil Pérez himself raises questions of authenticity.
Part 7. Explanations across time and belief. Over centuries, countless theories have emerged to explain the tale. Scientific guesswork. Some modern enthusiasts point to unknown natural phenomena, possible psychological experiences akin to waking hallucinations, or even early accounts of shared consciousness. No scientific model supports teleportation across oceans, especially without physical evidence, but the human imagination continues to explore the boundaries of what could be possible. Paranormal interpretations. In the 20th century, authors fascinated by unexplained mysteries suggested paranormal explanations. Teleportation through unknown forces, alien abduction theories, alternate dimensions intersecting reality itself. These interpretations, though speculative, reflect how the story has been adapted to fit the questions of modern curiosity. Folkloric and cultural meaning. Many scholars consider the Gil Pérez tale as an example of folk narrative. It shares common features with stories around the world about sudden disappearances, ghostly journeys, and impossible leaps through space and time. Such tales often reveal cultural anxieties about travel, about empire, about the thin line between the known and unknown. Historical skepticism. Historians remind us that the first written account naming Gil Pérez appears centuries after the supposed event. This gap raises questions about interpolation, embellishment, and the merging of separate anecdotes into a single compelling narrative.
Part 8. Why this story endures. What is it about the teleportation of Gil Pérez that has captivated listeners and readers for over 400 years? Perhaps it is the sheer improbability, a human traveling thousands of miles in a blink. The clash of worlds, the tension between empirical history and paranormal possibility. The narrative hook, a soldier in a foreign land who knows the truth before others do. The timeless theme, being out of place, misunderstood, and vindicated by truth. These are themes that resonate across cultures and ages, from ancient myths about gods who walked among us, to modern stories about unexplained disappearances and cosmic mysteries. And like any great legend, the story of Gil Pérez leaves us with questions that refuse easy answers.
Epilogue. In the mind's eye. So let us return to that moment, to the hot stone beneath his palms, to the weary eyes that closed for a rest. One breath, one blink, and then another world. Did Gil Pérez really disappear from Manila and reappear in Mexico City? History may never tell us for certain, but in that gap between what we know and what we imagine, his story lives, a bridge between reality and wonder, between the possible and the inexplicable.
And perhaps that is why, centuries later, we still tell his tale.